Good morning, aloha, friends of children. I am very thankful to the organizers of this 2011 forum for having the courage to invite me to speak in this plenary session. I am, or have been, a university administrator, and I've often had to deal with convocations. I am a Catholic priest, and I've given plenty of invocations. But today is the first time I've ever been asked to give a provocation. So thank you, Bonnie and Roger, for that idea. Because there are many things about HIV and AIDS that are provocating. Some of them provocating for good, positive accomplishments, and many of them for the not so good, for the negative things. And the first one I want to mention and deal with is what Bonnie mentioned in the opening session, stigma. The terrible problem that we continue to face of stigma in our communities, stigma against people who are infected or affected by the AIDS epidemic. Many years ago, somebody said that when we're dealing with this epidemic, we're not dealing with just one disease, but with three. There is HIV, which can be in the body for a long time doing its negative work. There is AIDS, which can develop, thankfully now because of drugs, much less than formerly, but it still does develop. And the third one is stigma. And science has been able to deal fairly successfully with HIV, fairly successfully with AIDS, but we are still in a problem with stigma. And one thing I think we should all bear in mind, stigma comes from people. It is people who stigmatize, not HIV. And we want to watch that and be aware of that. And it affects children in a number of different ways. First, if a child is himself, herself infected, the stigma attaching to that can be very powerful and very hurtful. One of my colleagues did some research in Tanzania and in Namibia about 18 months ago with children in schools who were living with HIV, so all of these were infected. And in every single instance, the child said, the hardest thing is what people are saying about us and what people are thinking about us, the stigma attaching to the disease. Then there are the children who don't have the disease themselves, but it's in their families. And again, the stigma can be very powerful there. I remember at a gathering, not quite as large as this, but we had a number of very, very brave young people who came up to the microphone to speak about their condition and their experiences. And one was a young girl, about 11 years old. Her name was Mutinta. And Mutinta began to tell us about how things were with her in school. And then she said, we were told by the teacher to write something, and I asked my companion for the loan of his pencil. And he turned to me and he said, why doesn't your mother buy you a pencil? Oh, he said, I forgot. Your mother died of that disease. Your mother died of that disease. You know how hurtful, painful that can be for a child. Indeed, in many ways, the stigma that is coming from one another, from their peers, is extremely hurtful for children. But then all of the other children, the millions of children across the world, where there may not be HIV in one of their colleagues or in the immediate families of their colleagues, how are these affected by it? Well, stigma in a community is a poison, and it's a poison that gets very easily into the heart of a child. The child grows up in an atmosphere where stigma is accepted without realizing it, is also a child who is building up stigma inside. This has happened, as we know so well, in the whole area of racism, but it's happening also in the stigma that attaches to HIV. And stigma is something very damaging. More damaging to the person who does the stigmatizing than to the one who experiences it. If I am stigmatized by somebody, it's something outside me. It's coming in on top of me. It's hurtful, it's painful, I don't deny that. But it does not belong to me. Whereas if I am stigmatizing, I am doing the dirty work. I am the one from whose heart the poison is coming out and spreading to the other person. A couple of years ago, we were very impressed at a conference in South Africa when a young Namibian woman called Victoria Bam, and that is her real name, spoke to us about her condition. She was living with HIV, she was on antiretroviral drugs. She told us how one of her children had sickened and died because of HIV, how the stigma that attached to the family became so great that her husband committed suicide, and she was left with her other daughter and herself. And she appealed to us. She said, "You people, you can give us medicine against HIV. When will you be able to give us medicine against stigma?" And not one of us could give her an answer. But I think now, if I had reflected then as I've been reflecting since, I could give an answer. Early childhood development is a strong medicine against stigma. Early childhood development brings children together at very formative age. They understand things, they hear things, they accept others, and this forms them for their life ahead. A couple of years ago, UNESCO advocated that for the 21st century, education should be built upon 4 pillars: learning to do things, learning to know things, learning to be my own person, make my own decisions, and learning to live together. And they said that learning to live together was the most important of all. And I think this is one of the most significant accomplishments of early childhood development, and we are grateful for it. Another provocation from me is what we carelessly call mother-to-child transmission. I don't like the term, and that's my first provocation. It leads to confusion. A social economist in Nairobi, Monique Tondoy, told us once when She revealed her HIV status to her young children, 6 and 7 years of age. Their immediate reaction was, "But mother, what about us? What about mother-to-child transmission? We might have it if you have it." Complete misunderstanding by the children that mother-to-child transmission was something much earlier in life and at a different stage, and that it's not something that could be transmitted casually by the mother and by the interaction with the children. But mother-to-child transmission also troubles me and troubles so many others, because using that term, we seem to imply that it is the mother who is responsible. Where is the father? What has happened to him? Why has he been left out? It's very good that the World Forum has the group, the working group for men, and this must be promoted always, because we must take account of what's happening, that it is not the mother always, but it is very often the father, but it is vertical from parent to child that the transmission is occurring. But there are other things troublesome in this area. And one is, we've known about mother-to-child or vertical transmission or parent-to-child transmission for a long time, 20, 30 years, you might say. We know how to deal with it. It's not expensive. It can be highly effective, but it is not reaching people, the people that count, pregnant women, in the numbers and at the times that are required. We began to meet here this morning at 8:30, and this session will run, if we stick to our time, until 10:15. During that time, globally, approximately 75 infants will become infected with HIV. More than 1,000 every day. That is not good enough in 2011. And we must say that loud, and we must say it clear. It is not good enough. And let me put that into context. I looked up some figures for this. In the United States, in the year 2009, 10 children under the age of 13 were registered as newly infected with HIV. 10. And in the entire epidemic, from its onset 30 years ago until the end of 2009, just over 9,000 children were registered as infected. In my country, Zambia, in the year 2009, more than 9,000 children were infected in that 1 year alone. If these rates continued, it would take the United States 900 years to be at the level that Zambia is at today. Going backwards, you might say. That again, surely is not something that we can tolerate, something that we can allow. And this is happening because medical services provision is not as good for the poorer people, the less developed parts of the world, than it is in the developing world. We have two standards, and these double standards affect our children. When you ask the administrators, the agency people, what is it that is going wrong? Why are we not getting all this treatment out to people, since we know what to do, and it has been with us for a long time? They give all sorts of excuses, but surprise, surprise, they blame the women. The women don't come for testing. The women don't take their drugs. The women stop coming back to get the information that they require. Always the women are blamed. Nothing about the systems, nothing about the provisions, nothing about the extension to people in rural areas, and very, very little about the men who make it impossible, or at least very difficult, for the women to take their medicines, to go for their treatment, to protect themselves against HIV and to protect their children against HIV infection. And we have a beautiful document, and most of you will know it well, A World Fit for Children, First Call for Children, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the World Declaration on Children of 15, 20 years ago. Wonderful principles, but in transmission of HIV, this is not happening for children, and this is something that is totally intolerable and that we must do something about changing. But there is good news on the horizon, some good news at any rate. When we met in Montreal, one of the things we complained loudly about was that drugs for children were not available, suitable for children, pediatric drugs. That has changed entirely now. These drugs are available, they're palatable, they're easily administered, and they are much cheaper than the comparable drugs for adults. But once again, this world is not oriented towards children as it should. Only about 1/3 of the children who are in need of these drugs are getting them. The rest are allowed to sicken and to die at a young age. And once again, this is surely something that we in the World Forum should make our voices known about, that we object to this, that this is something that we do not find tolerable. This is something that we cannot allow to continue. Again, going back to my own country, Zambia, approximately 1/3 of the children who have HIV are getting the drugs. 2/3 of the adults who are in need are getting them. Does it mean that an adult's life is twice as valuable as that of a child? We seem to be saying something along those lines. We do not seem to be taking account of the need to ensure that all is well with children. But when these drugs do get to the children, the transformation is fantastic. We may be showing tonight again the film that was shown at lunchtime yesterday, children living with SLIM. SLIM is the Ugandan word for referring to HIV and AIDS. And in it you see children, as they were in 2004, who did not have any medicines to help them, and as they became in 2009, 2010, after the medicine. The transformation is breathtaking. And mothers have been in clinics, mothers have had their children receive these medicines, and the joy is absolutely astounding. And it's not only at children's level, it's at all levels. Where the antiretroviral drugs can be given, the transformation is quite unbelievable. Everything seems to come back into life. The appetite comes back, the desire to work comes back, The desire to be with a family comes back, and people are themselves again, and you would not know that this one or that one is taking medicine of this kind, very toxic medicine, but still it is keeping that person healthy and keeping that person alive. A couple of years ago, I was speaking with a group of Baptist ministers. Actually, that was one of the miraculous things, if you wish, that HIV/AIDS brought about, that a Catholic priest could speak with Baptist ministers on sex and condoms. But I spoke something about the ARVs and their positive benefits, and amongst other things I just threw out that the appetite for sex also returns. And I had hardly finished till there was a hand up from a lady. I have been on ARVs for the past 3 months. Now that in itself was very significant in that group. I have been on ARVs for the past 3 months. I don't feel any increased sexual desire. But I thought that was enough said. But immediately, another lady put up her hand. You just wait, my dear. You just wait until you're 3 years on them like I am. Then you will know. But these drugs are wonderful. The Lazarus effect, as they call it. And we celebrate the accomplishment that has got 6 million people worldwide in the poorer, the less affluent countries onto these drugs, including children, and this is something that certainly deserves a good round of applause from us. But it's under threat. It's under threat because of the global financial downturn, 2008, 2009. Until 2009, funding for HIV and AIDS was rising steadily year by year. Very fast in the beginning, but still continued to rise steadily. 2009, it went flat. And 2010, it came down slightly. And what is the outcome? The outcome is that in clinics, people are coming for their medicine. They usually get 2 months' supply at a time so that they don't have to travel so frequently. They're only getting 1 month's supply. If they only get 1 month's supply, many of them won't come back. They're living too far away. It's too costly to get to the clinics for these things. And so they are sharing with one another in a family. They're taking the drug every second day, not as often as they should. They're resorting to all sorts of strategies to try and stretch out their supply. In other clinics, they're being told, right, last year you registered about 350 every month. This year, cut it to 250. And all over southern Africa, and I'm sure over Asia as well and other parts, this same message is going out. You've got to limit the enrollment of new people on HIV treatment, on antiretrovirals. You've got to wait until some vacancy has been created by somebody expiring or somebody not taking their medication. It reminds me very personally of something that happened to me myself in Lusaka about 20 years ago. I had very severe pains, chest, and they all thought I had a heart attack. I've no heart, so there was no attack. But I was rushed to the hospital, and as I was being wheeled into the intensive care unit, the door opened and a trolley came out with a towel or a sheet over what was obviously a dead body. And I heard one nurse saying to the other in a local language she didn't realize I understood, "Is he coming to take this one's place?" Now, that passed off. It was only a one-off and accidental. But that is happening today in clinic after clinic in Africa, with mothers, with pregnant women, with children, with adults. The drugs are not there because the money is not there to supply the drugs and to provide the treatment. And of course, that is something that is disastrous for the people. Is it a question of money? Oh yes, it costs money. It's costing a lot of money. But is it rather a question of priorities? Is the priority for giving health assistance to people who are so badly in need? After all, our governments were able to raise billions of dollars to salvage dodgy banks and people who are engaged in scandalous business operations and self-awarding of bonuses. But the same governments are not able to raise only a fraction of that money for saving human lives. That is scandalous. That is not the way it should be, and again, I think we in the World Forum should make our voices heard in this. And the final point I want to make is that in spite of all that doom and gloom, we have one wonderful thing, and that is our people, our common people, our ordinary people. They are the ones who are saving the day. They are the world, as we are the world. And as you are doing so much through early childhood development to help these ordinary people, you are also doing much to help the world to overcome HIV and AIDS. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream that one day I will see this world free of HIV and AIDS. I have a dream that out of the big mountain of problems that surround this epidemic, we will hew a rock of hope and of success. And I have a dream, and more than a dream, I have a certainty that the World Forum and early childhood development will contribute to this. I thank you.